Mean Old Lion Media presents Corner Table Talk.
Welcome, everyone, to Corner Table Talk. Thinking about my guest as I prepared for the show today, a few thoughts kept reoccurring. Why we are drawn to and connect with certain people we cross paths with in our lives, and why some stick. One of the personal attributes someone must possess to have a shot at success in the restaurant and hospitality space is to care deeply about the happiness of others. Sure, we can all be selfish at times, but when you're a restaurateur, as is the case with both gentlemen I'm about to introduce, when the tables are set, the lights ready, the music is at just the right level, and guests walk through the door, you can be assured these two gentlemen know how to create a guest-focused experience, which is a big reason why I came into the orbit of both of these men many years ago and stayed close and often been a beneficiary of the hospitality they both are very well known for. Alvin Clayton is the owner and operator, along with his lovely wife, Gwen. Happy birthday. I've heard it's Gwen's birthday. Happy birthday. No, we won't do that. That could last about 15 minutes. We won't do that one. But happy birthday, Gwen. And they are the owners of the renowned New Rochelle, New York restaurant, Alvin and Friends, described by the New York Times as a darling of downtown New Rochelle. 2015 Open Table, Users' Choice winners, Diners' Choice winners in 2015. They're known for Southern and Caribbean flavors, and I can attest to that. Jerk duck, rum punch, and Michael, he's also known for a killer fried chicken, which you also do. So I might suggest a cook-off at some point between the two of you. But named Best of Westchester 4 years in a row and known for combining urban sophistication with comfortable elegance. Alvin has also been known and continues to be known, because he still looks great, as a successful model. And aside, as if that's not enough, aside from being handsome, personable, Alvin can also paint, like really well, like as in people buy his artwork. So we're going to touch on some of that stuff. Michael Vann has been involved with multiple well-known restaurant brands throughout his illustrious career. I've known him since his days in the retail industry as an executive with New York retail giant Lord & Taylor since the early 80s. Michael made the move into hospitality as the GM of legendary B. Smith's, helmed by the beloved Barbara Smith. From there, Michael and a small group of partners opened the Shark Bar, which became the go-to spot for New Yorkers, actually from folks around the country, and was immortalized by Biggie Smalls on his track, I'm Lovin', and it's quote around Lovin' You Tonight. End quote. Michael moved on to create Soul Cafe, work with Sean Combs at Justin's, and helped Chef Carl Redding grow his soul food concept, Amy Ruth's. Most recently, Michael added Smitty Mo's at Newark's Gateway Center to his resume. Michael also plays some mean saxophone. So that was a new one on me, Mike. So anyway, both gentlemen are devoted fathers. They also happen to be talented in the kitchen, although I think of both of them more as front of the house guys. But needless to say, I am very pleased to welcome Michael Vann and Alvin Clayton to Corner Table Talk. Welcome, fellas.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Brad.
Pleasure to be here.
Michael, I'm honored to be on with you.
Brother.
Brad, thank you for the wonderful introduction. Who is that guy?
Right. You know who that guy is. I described you to the T. So we kick things off, fellas, with what I call short order questions. Just a couple of things I'm going to fire at you first. Mike, you can take it first, and then Alvin, you come in with your answer. Mike, tell me, what's in heavy rotation on your playlist these days, man? What are you listening to?
In the morning, I do, I got a gospel playlist. Then I move into John Coltrane, Love Supreme. And then I might funk it up in the afternoon. But I have favorite Sonos playlists. I don't have one song, but they're all mood music for me. You know, it gets me going throughout the day.
An essential piece to the day, I'm sure.
Essential.
Alvin, how about you, brother? What are you listening to, man?
You know what? I'm a jazz guy most of the times. So I listen to a lot of Miles Davis, especially while I'm painting. I'm also been listening to a lot of old classical soul, Marvin Gaye, the Temptations and stuff. I'm really just enjoying that vibe these days, man. So that's what I've been playing nonstop.
Yeah, I'm with you on that as well, man. I don't mind the balance between some jazz and some classic old soul. That works for me too. Mike, what time of day, man, do you feel most productive?
I have to start my day in prayer and meditation, and that sets the tone on what I prioritize for the rest of the day. As a creator, entrepreneur, driven by creativity and manifestation, any time of the day is good. Whenever the idea or the demand for what I have to accomplish, I'm 24/7. I always tell folks I'm 24/7. So I typically visualize at night, right, in dreams between probably that last period between 4 and 6 a.m. But after that, I'm off to the races, whatever I have to do.
I admire that, man. Alvin, what about you, man? You got to switch your brain back and forth a little bit because you're a business operator and you're an artist. But creatively, man, when do you feel most inspired?
Yeah, I'm most creative late night, man. Because of the art, I'm busy with the restaurant, so I'm taking care of business that time. Of course, I go to bed really late when I do go to bed, so I wake up a little later. So my day kind of kicks off kind of around like 11 o'clock, full pace, just getting stuff for the restaurant because I'm really kind of just really hands-on, especially in these climates, to make sure that the numbers are where they are. So I'm like very much hands-on with that still. And then, taking care of my guests and the restaurant. And then I go home and I go into my studio, and that's my most creative time, man. I paint from anywhere from, from midnight to probably 2, 3 in the morning sometimes. And it's quiet time. No phones ringing, no one to interrupt me. And I'm just like reflective, and that's like my Zen moment, man. And it keeps me balanced also. It's a good time to unwind for what I've done during the course of the day, dealing with people and everything else. And that's my Zen moment and recharge. So
I can picture that, man. You and Miles and that solitude, man, that can drum up some creativity, I'm sure. Michael, tell me, brother, what traits do you most admire in a friend?
Honesty, integrity, and consistency.
Yeah, they got to be there, right? When you need them.
Yeah. Well, true friends are always there. There's never a closed door. You know what I mean? So all this stuff evolves, but I instinctively know, who's my friend. I've had some ups, some downs as an entrepreneur in life, and you really know who your friends are. So instinctively, I know, after a few sessions, who has the character to be my friend.
Someone said that people show you who they are right up front, so believe them. Alvin, how about you, man? What traits do you most value in your friends?
I go along with what Mike said, but my restaurant is called Alvin and Friends, and there's a quote that I gave a lot of thought to, and it was like, your friends are people that kind of know your past. They're with you now, and they believe in you going forward in the future. And I mean, I just think that, people with integrity, because I think as friends, we need to find people that are in the same realm that we're in. And I consider my integrity to be one of my strongest values. And I look for those people to be around me as well. People I can depend on. I don't really want much from people, but I just want, the integrity and the honesty of who they are as people to be front and center when I deal with them.
Sure. Yeah. Feel you, man. Mike, tell me, man, fondest childhood memory around food?
Man, I would have to say I don't have any single items, but my dad was so quietly instrumental in dropping all the seeds of inspiration in my food game. He was a very creative dude, great with his hands, and to this day, I don't know anybody that has what we had in our house. In my early childhood, 5, 6 years old, my father built a brick barbecue grill in the basement of our house, man. And anytime we wanted to do barbecue, we could do barbecue. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, so the winters didn't stop smoked ribs, chicken or whatever we had to do. So, and then my grandmother used to cook and bake, and I would watch her cook and bake, and I was a kind of independent dude, so anytime I wanted cookies or brownies, I made them myself. So all those things were just layers that kind of built up my acumen and interest to enjoy food first. Never thought I'd own a restaurant, but I always have enjoyed what food brought to the table. No pun intended. But so.
Yes. Yeah. Alvin, how about you, man? I know you're Trinidadian native, but tell me your fondest memory.
It has to
food
be
memory.
like my grandmother. Growing up in Trinidad, we had like all of my cousins, we all lived within probably a mile of each other. And Sunday lunch was a big meal in the Caribbean. Lunch is when you do your major meal. And Sunday lunch and my grandmother, man, we'd have like about 20 people almost every Sunday. My grandmother was like a stickler for, knife and fork on the table set, all the patterned tablecloths and stuff in the Caribbean. And we'd all cook, man. And then my grandfather would make ice cream. We had that old churning ice cream. My brother and I would be churning. But it was just like, it was the best experience, man. Just like breaking bread with your family. And my grandmother was a great cook. And my grandfather, like Michael's father, was like a jack of all trades. He could build anything. My brother Ian was like under my grandfather all the time. And I was under my grandmother in the kitchen. So I get it from him. He can build everything. I can cook everything. But yeah, that experience of just being together. And that's the reason I named the restaurant Alvin and Friends, man. It's, people thought it was like because of investors, but it's really the best meals I've ever had have been with people that I care about and love. And that's the energy that we have at my restaurant. I go to all the tables and greet all my guests because I never remember anyone coming into my grandmother's house where she didn't offer them a little something, have some tea, have some this or whatever. And that experience to me, man, bringing smiles on people's faces and just breaking bread together is like the most amazing experience. And that's what I enjoy being in the restaurant industry.
Knowing both of you gentlemen as I do, to hear you describe those childhood memories really for me are foundational in who you have become as men. I see the through line, and I'm sure those of us who've been fortunate enough to be in any of your places also can appreciate where you got your inspiration from. Mike, tell me, man, past or present, who would you most like to host at an intimate dinner party?
Marvin Gaye would be my past, and present. Wow. I'd like to sit with Obama and kind of explore, what the 8 years meant to him and what he's going to do the remainder of his life, or how we can finish the work, So I think Marvin Gaye and Obama would be great.
Love that table. What about you, Alvin?
For me, definitely right now, I would love to be with Obama as well. It's, what he's done. He's an inspiration to so many of us. I know he inspired me. One of the people that passed that I think is just such an interesting character, and as a young man was so influential in me having positivity about young people being able to take the lead and doing things, is probably Michael Jackson. I just think that, when I was 12 years old or whatever, looking at this kid like leading a group, man, and just being at the best that you can be was just so inspirational to me. It just was like mind-boggling, Even today, when I think about what he did at the age that he did it, it was like a motivation for me, man. So he would be one of the people.
That'd be a great table. I was listening to a song of his the other day, and I'm going to forget which one it was. It wasn't Who's Loving You, but he couldn't have been much more than 10 or 11. And, the way that he connected at that young age to the emotion in every Maria. The song is called Maria.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it builds to a certain tempo, man, that how the hell he knew how to sing that way and have had a life experience to have had the ability to touch those emotions with a song was just amazing. All right, last one of these and then we'll dive in. So both of you guys are fashion, would have fashion in your background, and both handsome guys. I'm sure you both look great in a suit. So Mike, if you could have only one designer suit in your closet, who is that designer?
Well, I liked old Armani, man. That's what I wore a lot. I mean, he just had the nice touches. They were contemporary, but yet they were classic in design. He always had the most sophisticated textures and colors. I wore a lot of Ralph, but Armani would be the suit. It would capture that nice drape, right? Give me the shoulder space, and then drape like the 40s and 50s. So I always identify with Armani.
Good choice. Alvin.
Mike, you got good taste, man.
I was a menswear buyer. I was a menswear buyer too.
Because the both designers that you not that I'm following you, even though I have, because you had the Shark Bar before I had my restaurant. But definitely, I actually wore Armani back in the day,
of course,
and as my classical, like today, I wear Ralph. Yeah. And once again, it's the cut. When I think of fashion, man, I think of really buying pieces. Yeah. Because they're suits that I have from literally 20 years ago. Timeless. That I still wear today and get compliments on. So it's that classicism, man. And speaking of fashion, Brad, your father Howard was. He was the man with fashion too.
He knew a little. He knew a little bit about a good suit. Yep, and good fabric. Yeah. No question about it. Yeah. All right, so let's dive in here. And again, thank you both, Michael and Alvin, for taking the time to be here. So I'm curious, when did you two first meet? Alvin, do you have or Michael a memory of your first meeting?
Well, I used to see, Alvin graced all the magazines first. So it was always, that identity first. And I don't think I met Alvin until I came out to Georgia. I think I celebrated either my birthday at Georgia in the 90s. And I had a nice table. Denzel came and Paul Mooney, and, God bless his soul. And I think Alvin was there. I mean, so that was kind of like when I first knew he had an interest in the restaurants and everything else, and he was part of your team out there. And, or I think he was one of the owners as well, right? So that was probably the first time. And then we just would see each other over the years, man. And respects those with game, you know what I mean? And I've always admired. He was part of the A team. I have a top 5 in this game, and he's certainly one of those guys. And as yourself, and so it was more admiration and respect. We really didn't hang as friends, but we had mutual friends for sure.
Alvin, that consistent with your memory?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have great admiration for Michael too, and what he's done. I knew him from the Shark Bar, just as being a guest there and knowing that he was one of the partners at the Shark Bar. But we never really introduced ourselves. And I remember that time out at Georgia. I think that was probably one of the first times that I actually met you, on a personal level. Right. Certainly remember that time. And then, like you said, over the years, we've been into each other, run into each other at different places. And a mutual respect of somebody that actually, when you're in the game and you know what it takes to have people want to feel they want to open a restaurant, that person has done a lot of good things and have it look where it's easy. And I think Mike has definitely been that person, yourself included, Brad. There's probably a handful of people that, that operated at the level that we've all been blessed to operate at, having restaurants. And Michael is definitely one of those. And I think it's just the mutual respect that we've had for each other over the years, definitely.
Yeah. Well, we are truly the mutual admiration society amongst the three of us. And that's okay. I don't apologize for that. I definitely admire both of you guys. 2020, we're coming out of, an unprecedented year, certainly in our lifetimes. And, words like pivot and reset and protests and, elections took on a whole nother dynamic, but a lot to digest from this past year, right? But we're coming out of it now. We're vaccinated, or a lot of us are. Things are starting to open up. We're able to move around again. We're feeling a little bit better. But, there's still what we went through. We're still, maybe a little bit of PSD even, and we're not completely out of it. So I'm just curious what your takeaway has been from this past year and how you're feeling right now. Alvin, why don't you take that first?
Yeah, it's been a trying year, but I think also if you're in the restaurant industry, you've got to be nimble anyways. Things come at you from every angle. I mean, a lot of people don't see it. There's a lot of things going on. This might break down, that might break down, the weather. I took the pandemic as something, one thing else that we had to deal with, and took it one day at a time. I think the comforting thing about it is like everybody was going through it. So it wasn't like I was the only one immune from that. So, you make the changes. We were, a fine dining restaurant. So we had to make some changes. So I closed down for like 2 weeks, added some sandwiches and stuff to the menu to figure out, okay, how can we do that? And just kept the numbers intact. One of the great lessons that I learned from being partners with you, Brad, also was that, it's really important to own your business, your building or whatever, if you're operating as a restaurateur. And I was fortunate enough to own our building. So during the pandemic, I didn't have a landlord over my head. It was me dealing with the bank. I got deferments to put it on the back end. And, with the grace of God, we made it through. I mean, I felt really bad for a lot of businesses that didn't make it through. But, man, it's just one day at a time. You make the adjustments and you kind of, let it go the best that it can go. I just try not to harp on the negative stuff. You just, you got to tighten it up and keep it moving forward. That's what I did. And fortunately, it looked like we're on the other side of it. And so I'm thankful for that to have made it.
I'm happy to hear that, man. And yeah, those are, you're so right that we get hit with a lot of stuff in our industry and you have to be nimble. Mike, how about you, man? What's your look back on this past year and how's it affected you and how are you feeling?
I was fortunate to be in transition as COVID was moving into our lives. I was about to move to a larger location and a more central location in Newark, between Montclair and East Orange, and I was going to buy the building, and so COVID stepped in and put all that on the back burner, right? So for me, it gave me time to reassess where I want to be in my life. And so I took it as reflective time and recentering time. So I was fortunate enough to survive with some PPP money, right? So I've been just really laying in the cut right now and just rebuilding my spiritual mindset and readdressing where I'm going to open up the next location. And I'm heading out of the East Coast and I'm going south to where my family's from in Huntsville, Alabama. So for me, it's been time to solidify the last quarter of my life. So I'm taking it, it's been a good period for me. I'm spending time with my mom now. I've been here for 30 days. So for me, it's been rebooting my spiritual karma and everything.
Well, I want to come back to that, Mike, because I saw you before you left for Huntsville. You came and hung out with me a little bit, so I knew that trip was forthcoming, and I want to circle back to that in a minute. But I'm curious, speaking, of my own feelings here, I've definitely had some days that I've felt challenged, in our industry, not just this past year.
Sure.
But, you wake up some mornings and you just don't have it, but you've got to bring it anyway because there's a staff of people that are, expecting you to walk in the door and lift them out of whatever they might be feeling. And then you've got customers that are coming in and, they don't want to hear about your troubles either. So
nope.
I'm curious, Alvin, you're a pretty upbeat cat, man. I've always known you to be a very optimistic brother, but I know, man, that it can't possibly be that every morning you wake up and it's just raring to go and just optimism overflowing. But how do you manage your own the self-talk that we all have? That voice inside of us some days that tell us we're not up to it, or we're imposters, and other days it tells us go get it. How do you manage that self-talk?
You know what? I've been blessed, man. I have an amazing wife, to be honest with you. My wife, Gwen, there are mornings when you're right. I don't feel like getting out of bed, and or you have 100 things going on in your mind, but she is there to give me that push. So it's been a great balance, because the days that I don't feel great, she's my motivation, and and pushing me. So they said, behind every great man, there's a probably a greater woman. So I do have to give her credit, because she's the partner with me in this restaurant, and there's a lot of things that I couldn't do without her. And that's the base, man. I just she gets me back on track.
Yeah. Well, props to Gwen for sure, and props to my wife Linda, because she does that for me a lot. Mike, I know you've raised Sydney. You and Sydney's mom were no longer together, but I know you were raising her together, and you lost Sydney's mom not too long ago. And that had to have been a very tough thing to go through. But same question to you, brother. I know you're spiritual, and I admire your spirituality. But how do you manage that self-talk, that inner voice that lifts you up and can take you out at the same time?
Brad, there's method to the madness, and I've been praying on my knees since I can remember 2 years old. I pray every time I have a meal. So there's a fortitude that I've developed over the years, and part of my mission as an entrepreneur, as a person, or my purpose is to serve, right? So I'm not saying it's easy, but what I do, I have to stay in routine, right? And in my karma every morning and every day. And that's what I use. I use that consistency to get me in the state of mind to engage with other people's spirits and how they are. But I'm a servant. So I wake up with that mentality, and I try to stay balanced with my connection to my higher being. So that's the only answer I can give you, Brad. Really, I play my horn. I play my horn. All those things that are God-given, I use to realign myself each day.
And I guess we can add to that, that we don't let the highs take us too high. So
No.
that we don't let the lows take us too low. We try to stay somewhere in that middle, in that sweet zone.
Yeah.
So let's I'm going to change direction here and just talk a little bit about your respective business models, because I think there's a lot of conversation going on now since we've experienced what we just did, and everybody having to again, using the word pivot or reset. Alvin, you operate a full service sit down restaurant, fine dining, which means full staff, front and back of house. Operating costs are going up. I know the industry is challenged in terms of finding employees around the country. It's been a challenge. I'm curious how you are managing that with your business model. Prices at some point, I would imagine, have to start to reflect the rising cost, minimum wage, and what have you. I'm curious just how that is affecting you, and what changes, or what are you considering? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's definitely all the things that you've mentioned have actually been front and center in our discussion lately. The food costs going up. We have white tablecloth. People don't realize that you end up having to, during COVID, as soon as somebody touched a tablecloth, you had to change it. So even that became a huge expense, or somebody would come and they would ask, to move to another table. You can't put that cost to them right there, but it all added up, and the prices. So we've been actually, raising the prices a little bit. The minimum wage for restaurant workers have also gone up. And to be honest with you, we haven't fully passed that on to the customer yet, because, we still want to slowly get into, you can't move from selling something for $5 to $10. People are going to wonder what's going on. So it's slowly going there. I've just been a little more hands-on with what, the way I'm handling it. Actually back in the trenches, doing stuff where I can until the numbers go back up. But it is a challenge, and it's a conversation that's being had right now as we move forward with the business.
Yeah. I know you operate like I do, Alvin, and the more jobs there are just means the more work we do. So I can relate. Mike, you had a different vision, man. When you envisioned Smitty Mo's, you decided to scale it down. Mm-hmm. And unlike, both Alvin and I, whose rooms kind of would require our presence given the full service model, you designed something a little bit different. You had something different in mind with Smitty and Mo's, which is kind of more a fast, casual style. Although the great night that I was there, you were in the room, we had a blast. The food was delicious, of course. But I'm curious if in hindsight now, as you're looking forward, do you think that model, are there advantages to that model since you've done both?
Well, I do. I made a calculated change and shift in my restaurant developments. I always saw an opportunity in the better quick service model. And so I had made that transition probably around 2010, right? And I was looking for different opportunities, and Newark presented an opportunity that fit the timeline of what I wanted to do. And so I had an opportunity to test it. And I'd been studying it for a while because I just thought that's where the market was going. I feel that the full service market is not growing. It's not in the growth mode. There's certainly special cases like Alvin. He's the mayor of New Rochelle. So, I mean, there's always going to be a place for that special sit-down full-service model. But he's got to invest in it. He's going to have to make that investment, and his community is going to have to roll with him because the labor costs across the board to operate full service, I think it's prohibitive in the economic climate that we're in right now. So for me, that's the only thing I'm doing is quick service, better quick service. I'll be in the food hall operating model. That's where I'm going. And I wanted to talk to Alvin about being part of that. So we kept trying to schedule a meeting, and we haven't had a chance to do it. So I want to help. I see a way that I can help Alvin shift. He can maintain that full service model, but we can shift some of his categories and classifications into this quick servicing under this food hall umbrella I'm developing. So to be continued, Alvin, if you don't mind. So I think the
absolutely. I know. Yeah, we were trying to get that, and then the COVID thing hit.
Yep, it's really. I think it's the only. There's no safe haven, but if you're going to have to pay people $10 and $15, you're going to have to pay folks who can multitask, and they're going to be in the kitchen and so forth. So I found that that operating model best serves paying folks that type of wage, right? Where they're doing some food handling stuff, they're doing some service stuff, they're doing some prep, and that model has allowed me to cross train, right, my staff that way. So for me, that's the future.
So, Alvin, I want to come back to you because, I know personally that part of the reason why I was in the restaurant industry was because I enjoyed being in the room. That was a big part of it for me. At Alvin and Friends, you're as much a part of that experience as anything else there, if not more. And so to Mike's point, that obviously requires your presence, which does limit scalability. And quite frankly, I don't even know that scalability was even that a factor I considered, in terms of my decision to be in the industry or to stay in the industry in the way in which I did. But Mike makes some good points in that if, you do have some good stuff going and there is, the possibility that there are other opportunities for it. I'm just curious how you feel about any of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Mike hit on some really good points. And the thing that I do have as an advantage right now, I think it's because we've become like a brand here definitely in New Rochelle and the Westchester area. And I think once you've kind of branded yourself, there are other opportunities that presents itself. So, we're in the type of, first of all, we have a food base that people love, but not everybody has it in that kind of environment. So we were able, because we had in the fine dining establishments such as Georgia was, to be able to kind of really, make a name outside of the mom and pop type situation. And so I think now there's probably opportunity for merchandising. I think there's possibilities for product, spice mixes and different things like that, because we do have a name that has gone on with what we do. I also think that the vegan market, which I added to the restaurant like a few years ago, has been huge. I mean, we have, especially with takeout and delivery now, we have like so many vegans ordering from our restaurant. And it's also has become an inclusive part when people come into the restaurant now, because in the past, somebody would say, oh, you can put this side together or that side together. Right. People see that we've actually paid attention to it now. And I think I might be onto something, because I was just hearing that Danny Meyer is planning to do, I think, 11 Madison, like full vegan, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's a trend that's moving. And I think that's a market share that's actually still underserved. So there are certain ways to move into that market. And I think, like I said, merchandising and product manufacturing is one of the revenue sources that I know is definitely on the table still for what we do.
Mm-hmm. So multiple revenue stream development is something that you're going to be looking at. So I want to take a step back a little bit, Mike. You hail from Gary, Indiana. And you are not Gary's only famous son, I might add.
There's another Mike.
Brought up a name earlier that a few folks might know. So, Mike, if you would give us a little snapshot of Gary and when and what caused you to decide to leave, and how did you land in New York? Why was it New York City? Why was that the place that you decided you needed to be?
Gary was a great foundational city for me. It was vibrant. It meant something to be black. We had the first black mayor in a major city in Gary, Richard Hatcher. We had one of the best school systems in the country. So all those foundational things were wonderful, man. I had a chance to move from the inner city to a white environment when I was a sophomore with a beach. And so I got a nice cross section of urban upbringing, right? And Michael Jackson inspired me too. I mean, I watched Michael in talent shows at the Jackson 5, man. So Gary was a city, Denise Williams, and there was so many people that got inspired by Michael and their evolution, right? So that's gave me the confidence to just run. I mean, once I graduated from high school, I went to Western Michigan, and I came home and worked in the steel mills for one summer. But after that, I was on my own, man. And so from Michigan, I graduated in 79. I took a fashion merchandising trip to New York with the fashion merchandising department at Western, because I wanted to own my own clothing store. The first entrepreneurial goal was to own my own clothing store. I wanted the Black Barney. So when I came to New York for that trip, we stayed a week. It was no question this was the city I had to be in. The vibrancy, the diversity.
What year was that, Mike?
79. May of 79, I took a trip to New York and fell in love with it. We got the tour of the fashion industry. We got the tour of the theater and blah, blah, blah. So, Chicago was my sister city. I was born in Chicago. So Chicago was only 30 minutes from Gary. But New York was just like another planet, right? And there's some other stories, some childhood stories. But I had a sense of New York in my spirit. And once I landed from the airport, man, I knew this was the city. So I sent a resume to Lord & Taylor, Saks Fifth Avenue, Barney's, and Lord & Taylor was the only company that had a executive training program at the time, and I've been here for 42 years, man. I have not looked back, and the clothing store certainly went by the wayside, but New York gave me, my entrepreneurial bones. And
we're gonna come back to that, but obviously New York was ready for you too. Alvin, you grew up in Trinidad, island life, beautiful place to grow up, I'm sure. Tell us a little bit about Trinidad, and then what made you decide to make the move? I know modeling industry had to intersect with that decision making at some point, but take us back there and tell us how you wound up in New York City and when.
You know what? I wouldn't trade having been born in Trinidad for any place in the world, man. It was just like, it was really, my childhood experience was magical, and, my mom came to the United States, as all immigrants to have a better life for their family. And I was fortunate enough to move in with the person that I love, like, their life, my grandmother. And that was just like an amazing experience growing up with my grandmother, man. I love my grandmother. She's my heart, you know. I mean, I love my mom, but I give the person that I am credit to my grandma, you know. And so, you know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and then obviously after I got drafted by San Diego to play soccer, because I went to Mount St. Mary's in a soccer scholarship, and a friend that modeled, you know, in New York thought that I could be a model. I never really was interested. And then the NASL, which was the Outdoor Soccer League at the time, folded. I was a goalkeeper. I had an option to try out for a goalkeeper indoor, but I didn't want to do that. So I took my friend's offer up and said, you know, do you think your agency would be interested in seeing me? It was the Wilhelmina Modeling Agency. I came to New York, and you know, they signed me. You know, they told me how difficult it was for Black models. But then they said, we're going to give me a try, and, you know, the rest is history. And so that's how New York was great for me. And I actually got into the restaurant business because a friend of ours, Brad Gale, asked me one day when we were on a Macy's shoot, you know, what I planned to do after modeling. And I said, you know, I love hospitality. I worked as a waiter when I first started modeling. And I said that, you know, maybe I know how to cook for my grandmother. Maybe I'll open a restaurant or something. After modeling for that many years, you know, I needed to do something for myself. And she introduced us, as you recalled. And, you know, for whatever reason, you took a liking to me and invited me to invest with you guys at Georgia, which I did. And I learned, like, you know, basically the back of the house from you and your dad, Howard. And I'm still looking for you.
Well, let's.
So
that's great
my
story.
New York introduction, man.
Yeah, let's come back to that because I do want to talk a little bit about what got you interested in joining the team with us at Georgia. But Mikey, you made the decision at some point to make the leap from the retail industry into the hospitality industry. Also, you came from outside the industry and decided that restaurants looked appealing to you. I'm curious. So this is the early 80s, mid 80s, I guess.
Yep.
Where were you hanging out, and how did the B. Smith's opportunity evolve for you?
Wow, man. This is part of the book for sure. After being in the fashion industry as a buyer, you know, making those benchmarks as a Black man, I saw the limitations as an entrepreneur, right? Owning my own clothing store was probably the most difficult thing in the world. So at that time, because I left Lord & Taylor in 87, I made a decision this wasn't the industry that I was going to make my mark as an entrepreneur. So I left it. And along the way, I had always been hanging out in Michael Weinstein's restaurants, man. I mean, every one, from Museum Cafe. My favorite was the Saloon on 64th and Broadway across from Lincoln Center. I posted up there so much, man. I met Michael, I met Vinny, I met all the guys, right? And because I was just a great customer. Because as a buyer, I was always entertained. So I would always pick Michael's restaurants to go to. So knowing that I was going to make a shift, I was always like a sponge in all these restaurants, man. I watched everything he did. And one of the restaurants I went to was America. Right? America was the hottest thing, you know, one of the largest restaurants in New York City in 1985-ish, 86 or so. And I met Barbara Smith there, man. And I was enamored. I was floored. I was in love, right? And so we became friends as me as a customer and her as one of the managers of America. And I met Richard Wright there. I always managed to integrate myself with the staff because I knew in the back of my mind this was an industry that I could get into, right? And all those things just was always dormant. So when I left Lord & Taylor in 87, I had made a decision that I wanted to be a film producer, a producer of television, film, and theater. So I went to Barbara. I said, Barbara, I'm in transition. I want to be a producer, but I need to start and land somewhere. And she gave me an opportunity to be a manager at B. Smith's. I brought all of my retail acumen to that opportunity, and she gave me the platform to develop my skills, my personal skills, where my personality could shine, and I helped her build that business in the first 4 years. She could go home, she could rest assured that I was taking care of her place. And from there, people kind of just watched me work. And an opportunity came up that I saw, and I pitched an idea to a gentleman, potential investor, about rebranding a operation that was on the Upper West Side called the Shark Bar. It was a bar, small bar. And these guys invited me to be partners with them, but it had limitations. So I saw an opportunity to expand the brand. So I rebranded that. And that's how I got into the industry. I pitched it to this guy over brunch, and he wrote me a check within 2 weeks. He's a dear friend because he believed in my vision. And that's how I got started. And the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is history. Good history, man. And I do hope you write that book. Alvin, so for you decide to make the move to Los Angeles at one point, as you alluded to. You and I got reconnected. I was transitioning from the nightclub business to back to the restaurant business, and had plans to open up Georgia on Melrose. You and I got together, and I thought, fantastic. You were interested in coming in, you got involved, and, together we really kind of ran, that restaurant from the front desk. So just tell me a little bit about that experience for you. And then, you leave Los Angeles and go back to New York, and rather than go to the city, you decide to open up Alvin and Friends in Westchester, which I thought was an interesting idea and has definitely proven to be fantastic. But just walk us through a little bit of that from your perspective and what you gained.
What took me to Los Angeles was that Gwen, her company was moving her out, and she wasn't going to come out to Los Angeles unless I was coming with her. We weren't married at the time. I called, being a model, I could probably be based from anywhere. So I called my agency in LA and asked them if they thought I could work out there. And they said, "Oh, we would love to have you." And so we were coming back from the vineyard actually. And I said, "I'm going with you to LA." And that's how we got out there. The experience of it was great. You were getting ready to open Georgia. And so I actually saw, almost from conception, to operation with you. And you were very kind. I give credit every day when I talk about my restaurant experience to you. And I also learned a lot from your dad, Howard. I always tell this story. I mean, I'm a very hospitable guy, but I remember one day I was at the restaurant, and it was a Sunday, early Sunday. And the first guy that came in, he was with a date. And I gave him what was considered our best table at the restaurant. And so he sat down, and, 2 minutes later, I was on the phone talking to somebody, and Howard and I were, just chatting. And the guy came up and decided he didn't like that table. He wanted, another table. And I'm thinking, I just gave you the best table in the restaurant, So you're trying to flex for your girl. I'm going to flex for you, right? So I said, "I'll be right with you." And Howard said, "Alvin, you go take him to the table right now." And I'm like, so Howard and I kind of went to the back and got into it a little bit. And I'm a young man. I'm like, shit, I just gave, and Howard had that look, right?
My man.
So anyways, I go out and give the guy the table. And then he said to me, he goes, "Listen," he goes, "we're in business because that guy is in here. And if he wants to sit on top of the restaurant and it doesn't do anything to, detract into the business that we do, you let him sit on top of the restaurant." And I thought about that, and I was like, you know what? He's absolutely correct. And that was one of my early lessons in, restaurateuring. And there's a lot of stuff that comes to you and can get you frustrated or whatever, but you can't take it personal. And my whole thing is, you treat guests as you would like to be treated. And I think if that's your starting place, that's a good place to be. And, my experience at Georgia was just a tremendous one, man. I learned so much from you guys. It really was a fun place and an honor to be a part of that. I was modeling, and I would come back from a modeling shoot and came into the restaurant to work, and you had a joke because I try to do everything. You're like, "Damn, you got another job? You got 100 jobs," but it's really is a labor of love. And to be in the industry, you have to love it. And I think one time, Brad, you were in probably going to produce a film or something, and you had a character part that you said, I'm going to put you in this movie. You're going to be the bus boy. You're going to be the bellhop, the manager.
Yeah. See, I was on to something early with how to save labor. I said, you just get Alvin. Alvin can do everything.
That's classic.
So that's great, man. So you move, you leave LA, you go to Westchester instead of New York City and decide to do Alvin and Friends. Why Westchester, Alvin?
Well, Gwen's best friend, the family, the Lorenzo family, they were out here in, Angie was out in New Rochelle. So whenever we came to visit from the East Coast, we would come out and we'd hang out in New Rochelle. And we really loved the community being, just 23 minutes from New York City. And we really became a part of the community. And I saw the lack of, what we had at Georgia, it was missing here. I mean, every restaurant, first of all, there was a affluent Black community, the Graves from Black Enterprise and, Ken Chenault and all these guys lived out here. And the only places that served our food were mom and pop type things. So I saw the business opportunity in our community. And, I reached out to the people here and they were like very welcoming, man. And that's, I think for me, Westchester was the right place,
Yeah. I felt the loss when you guys left LA, man, because not only were you just a good friend, but you guys had great parties, and I would often go and drink rum punch and be in the room and have a blast there, man. Rum punch. So Mike, man, as you alluded to, you've taken some time, you've done some traveling the last few months, man, and I'm so glad you've decided to kind of relax a little bit and get out there and see and spread your vision. But you spent some time in Huntsville where you have some family and you're considering opportunities there. Just give us a little taste of what you're thinking, what you saw in Huntsville that appeals to you and kind of what your vision is.
Huntsville is a mid-sized city, I guess small mid-sized city, is about 195,000. And all my family is from Huntsville, right? Every paternal side, maternal side, 2 to 3 generations. So I'd always had thoughts of going back to Huntsville, right? My grandfather had land and so forth, and I always told him that I wanted to come down there and develop the land and so forth and create generational wealth for my family. So for me, Huntsville creates that layered cross-generational move for me. So when I went down there, I reacquainted myself with my cousins and so forth, and I saw the city's growth, man. I've never experienced a city where every corner there's a shovel being put in for housing development. And I'm from a city, Gary, Indiana, which is the antithesis of this city, right, where I grew up in. It was a single industry, city. And once the steel industry softened, Gary decayed, right? I took a drive with my daughter 2 days ago and showed her Gary, man. It's devastating, right? So Huntsville, right, every square foot is being built, right? Gary's largest population was 185, 190. Huntsville is 190 now, and I see it growing another 20, 30,000 in the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to be the largest city. They project it to be the largest city in Alabama within 2 years. And so I see huge opportunity on the food side. I didn't see a lot of artisanal food. I saw a lot of national brands and so forth, regional national brands. So I think there's a huge opportunity to create the artisanal movement down there. So I'm going to go do that and develop a program that I can teach entrepreneurship and create business models that I can grow from. So that's kind of where I'm going, right? It's call it the fourth quarter. We've had these conversations before, me, you, and our mutual friends, right? It's the fourth quarter. And I see my role is to be teacher right now. Right? I don't see operating 12, 14 hours again, like I did at Smitty Mo at 60. I'm not doing that again, but I will be, extending my wisdom to as many people as I can and hopefully put them in business. That's my goal.
Well, that's a beautiful thing, Mike, and not to be undervalued, because the wealth of knowledge that you've accumulated in your many years in the business as an operator and a visionary, I think is I would hate to see that undervalued. I think you could be, instrumental in helping to build the structure that you described, and people are going to follow you wherever you are, whether it's Huntsville, Harlem, or Newark. People are going to go wherever there's a Michael Vann project. Alvin, your art, man, is really evolving, and I've been a lover of your work for many years. We had stuff of yours up at Georgia. I know you've sold paintings through the years to bold-faced names and regular folks. What are you thinking, man, art wise? Are you looking for an exhibition space somewhere? Is there a museum that should be knocking on your door? What are you thinking there?
Actually, I'm seeking the possibilities of museums now. In 2022, I'm going to be the featured artist at the Rye Art Center, which is actually a big deal. I'm going to have a one-man show there.
Congratulations, man.
But thank you. But my art has changed, man. And, I think the artist has to speak to the times. And what has happened is the last administration affected me in a certain way. And so I got my frustrations or my feeling powerless through my art. And so I was doing some political pieces. I was reached to by the curator from Iona College, which is a college here in New Rochelle. And she was like, listen, this body of work is really important. I'd like to do a show for you. So it was during COVID. So she did a virtual show for me. It was called Unapologetically Me. And I showed 23 of my political pieces. And it was received really well, man. And somehow it got to IMG Models, and they reached out to me and actually re-signed me to model. And they're working with me also to get my art out in different ways. And so, I just really feel blessed. But the art now, it's taken on a significance of, we know what the problems were. I've painted the problems. What are some of the solutions? Mm-hmm. So my art now and moving forward are things that's solution driven, man. It's just like,
it's beautiful.
I really believe that there's a lot going on right now and a lot that artists can say. And everything that I'm painting now is really having really great thought into it and being a bit of a story and a message to what's going on. And I have a Instagram, Art Absolution is my Instagram page for my art. And it gives a good feeling of where the art has been going. And I've been selling quite a bit, man. Thank God. During COVID, I sold some really large pieces. And I continue to paint every day. It's like like I said, my Zen moment. I get into my zone and do my
fantastic, man. And we're going to continue to be moved by your art. But you see what I mean, Mike? He's got how many jobs did you just describe, man?
He's a true Renaissance man. and getting paid, though, Brad. He's getting paid.
And taking on more jobs.
You know what I'm saying?
Man. Well, listen, Michael Vann, Alvin Clayton, two guys I admire greatly, not just because you are successful businessmen and I love the spaces that you create and the environments, and always look forward to being in those rooms. But I just think you guys are just two special cats, man. And I feel really fortunate to count you on my list of close and valued and trusted friends. And just really appreciate that you both have taken the time here. Mike, I wish you the best with the book, the Huntsville development. I know we're going to be hearing and seeing big things out of you. And Alvin, anybody that's in the New York City area has to go to Alvin and Friends. I know I will be there on my next trip to New York. And I just want to thank you both again. It's been such an honor and a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, man. It's been my honor for sure. Alvin, love you, brother. Love you guys, man.
I love you too, Mike.
Hopefully this is just the beginning of something for the three of us.
Absolutely. Let's stay in touch, man. And Brad, thank you so much for so much over the years, man. And I do count you as one of my best friends, and, always blessings to you and the family, man.
Yeah. Lots of love, brothers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, bro.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to this segment of the Corner Table Talk called How We Move. Ambassador Shabazz, good afternoon.
Hi there, my dear. I'm moving.
You deep breathing?
I'm deep breathing. So I'm moving in place is what I'm doing.
Moving in place. Is that exercise or is that spiritual or
spiritual and pause? And I think that's where I am right now. I mean, there's certainly a lot of physical movement, but a lot of it really is the mind space to move the chess pieces around. And the wonderful things that have landed on my plate are likened to the journey of your recent guests today. You know, how do you take a challenge and make something new and wonderful from it, reflective between fortitude and gratitude, right? And the skill set thereof. And it was really great to listen to that and the journeys without regret. That's, I think, you know, last year there was a lot of boogeymen in the forest on the plate, you know, the apprehension, fear, the unknown. And I think the reflection, downtime, of the pauses that we were forced into were timely, you know. And even here, there's a state representative here in Louisville, where I am, who is a real engaged neighbor in her community, not just from the political side, but just as a resident. And there's a building that's an eyesore right in front of her home, but you would pass it leaving Muhammad Ali's home and on your way to a Samuel Plato building. And, you know, I asked her, you know, what would you like to see there? And she said she was hoping that the building would be torn down, demolished, and replaced with a green space or a garden or a meditation park. And the fact that one never thinks of that in an urban community, that people would welcome a meditation park or a place to sit, greet, and respond to one another. And so I think about that in context to, you know, the pauses, where we are and what we build as a result of those pauses. Something that heals, and also that's something that's transformational. And it's not without making it a business, so that it enables a community to sustain or thrive. Somehow or another, we've thought that being in the world of enterprise, that you can't do it while being holistic. So it's finding the blend for that and being responsible for our own sustainability.
But I also, you touched on, the balance aspect, because, as you were describing the potential green urban space, which is what you're talking about, and urban gardening has become a thing, certainly in the last few years. But I think about Central Park, in New York, and what would Manhattan be without Central Park, but a bunch of concrete and buildings, and with rivers on or surrounded by water, as the case is, but without that greenery, that lush park to go to, how much the city residents would miss that.
And the landscape of Central Park is intentional. Right? I mean, where you walk, where you pause, where you sit, the fact that water is outside of the boathouse, off of Fifth Avenue, but it introduces you, or you can exit off 110th Street right into Harlem. The fact that you could walk home and use it as part of your map from downtown to uptown. It's intentional. And, Kentucky has about 4 different Oldham parks as well. But I always say to people, where is your Central Park? I would mean it metaphorically as much as I meant literally. Los Angeles, they had the Beverly Center, then you had Rodeo Drive. When they built the Grove, it kind of mixed everybody. Anybody can go. And I think most places underestimate, based on economics or sides of town, that we all need a gathering spot. And with that said, there are these brothers in Atlanta, 2 young brothers who created a location site, a headquarters in Atlanta called The Gathering Spot. Brian Wilson and TK Peterson. And it is a merging of culture, communication, and collaboration. That's what they say. And it's done so. I was there and I was speechless. I just sat in the back of the room as they were hosting a Know Your Rights camp. And I learned that these 2 young brothers decided they needed an upscale yet accessible location. And this is about 3 years ago. that I was there. And their primary locations then were Atlanta, DC, and Los Angeles. But now they're in 4 different locations. They said our mission is simple: to create a world where opportunity is the byproduct of community and collaboration. And they've done that.
What's the name? Is it the same name for each city? The Gathering Spot.
Yeah, the Gathering Spot is who they are. And they have membership and investors. And I know I've beckoned them to come to different locations because I think what they've done is simple yet tasteful. New generation, they're in their 30s. They get it, though. They understand it. So when you speak to the colleagues that are our own, and the fact that even your 2 guests, Mr. Clayton and Mr. Vann, referenced their parents, your parent, we're passing that torch. What's the bridge between that? So when Michael Vann says, I don't know if I want to put that much energy in, but I'll teach, I'll reach, I'll touch. I think that's where all of us are. And I think those of us in our 60s, it's a cool place to be, to have had the 30, 40 professional years and know that we can add, our wisdom has value. Our experience has value. And I think that this kind of meditation park, the fact that that would even be considered normal, characteristic, and fitting in an urban environment is ideal right now. And of course, we're prayerful. Mr. Vann referenced all the time that he starts his day with a pause and a prayer. Many do, one way or the other, not always associated to theology, but we need it. And I think last year was the thing that enforced that kind of pause. But it feels good and it manifests.
So while we're on that subject, and since I touched on it with Michael and Alvin, I'm curious about you. So your inner voice, how do you regulate the, we all have the one that tells us that we're not as good as we should be, and the other tells us that we should go for it, that, it encourages us. So there's the 2 sides, but how do you regulate that inner dialogue?
The practice for me has been since childhood. It was an innate one. What I realize now is when I've been so busy and I'm tilting and I'm off kilter, that I hadn't paused, that it had been so busy that I hadn't paused, that I hadn't given myself, that I hadn't called upon my summit, my spiritual summit. So mine is not just broadly, dear God. It is usually my spiritual summit, and those were those that went before me. So we can call them ancestors, or we can call them colleagues or friends, but those are the ones that loved me on earth, that I know are part of my accompaniment even now. But I do that, and I trust it. I know when I have lost it. Like somewhere in my 40s when you think you can wing it. And then times when you realize, no, I think that other thing worked. Checking in with my center self, my soul self. And it's one of the things I get to help others guide. So I can understand and read one's marrow. And sometimes we forget our marrow. We live so much on the outside that we don't realize that our marrow comes with all that we need in terms of food and fuel. But if we don't nurture it, if we don't support it, if we don't take care of it, there's no way to harvest from it.
And taking that occasional pause, as you often talk about, is also required. So on that note, we will take a pause here until the next time, but do thank you for those spiritual insights as we all try to balance the challenges and the good things about life. Absolutely. All grateful to be here. So Ambassador Shabazz, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you, my brother.
Corner Table Talk is hosted by Brad Johnson, produced by Brad and Linda Ailes Johnson. Theme music, Life Goes On by Bryce Vine. Executive producer, Ken Johnson. Find the Corner Table Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Corner Table Talk is a Mean Old Lion Media production.